Hi, loves, and welcome to the With Love Always podcast, a podcast to help you live the life you were created for. We are your hosts and your friends, Bree
and Marissa,
and we're so grateful you're here.
We pray you listen and leave feeling more inspired, encouraged, and uplifted.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. We are so grateful as always that you are tuning in to this conversation today. For today's conversation, we are going to be talking all about connecting to your inner child. And as always, our conversations are so inspired by things that we are navigating and things we're talking about in our personal day-to-day life. And so this is actually a conversation that was really inspired by conversations I was actually having with my boyfriend this week of just what would it look like if we walked through life so connected with who we truly are and not who the world has told us to be. And it really had me just thinking of this concept of the way that we are so influenced by life around us, responsibilities around us, social media, culture, all these things, that it's so easy to get disconnected with who we really are at our core, the things we love to do, all these sorts of different aspects of ourselves. And I think when I was really reflecting on it, it really comes down to who was I before the world tried to tell me who I am. And when I think of that version of myself, I think of me as a child. I think of me in my innocence before I feared any opinion of anybody. And so it really made me realize of so much of our greatest joys in life is when we were like a kid, when we didn't care what the world had to say about us, when we weren't worried about the opinions of others, we weren't worried about what was right or what was wrong, what was cool, what wasn't cool. We just were, and we existed, and we just had our being. And so as an adult, I think it's so easy for us to lose the wonder and the joy and the awe of just being like a child where you're not afraid of what the world is going to say against you. And though being an adult, we have our responsibilities, we have all these different aspects that influence us and touch us in our day-to-day life, I think there's a really beautiful opportunity to still somehow, some way connect to your inner child and find that freedom and find that joy in your day-to-day life. And so I know that's something that I always want to be in pursuit of, and that's something I want to invite you guys to be in pursuit of. And I feel like this topic is so for the person out there who maybe you do feel right now in the season so much pressure to just fit in. You feel the pressure to be cool. You feel the pressure to be like somebody else. Maybe you're feeling really down about yourself and feeling really discouraged because you're like, man, nothing I'm doing is good enough. I'm not fitting the mold. I'm standing out. Or even narratives that, in conversations I was having around this of like, oh, it's so weird that I enjoy this, or oh, I'm ashamed that I actually like this and not that. And I think there's so much expectation that the world places on us of what we should be, like I said, but what would we be like if we just washed out all the noise and just pressed into who we really were created to be? And so I think there's a lot of freedom in this idea. I think there's freedom from insecurity, freedom from comparison, freedom from, just trying to be like the rest of the world. What would it look like if we were really believing we are fiercely unique and fiercely individual and truly fearfully and wonderfully made? And so that's the inspiration behind this conversation today. And I'm so excited to just dive into more of what it looks like to live a life where you're so connected to your inner child and you find more joy in your day-to-day. So a verse that really inspired this conversation and I referenced to when just like thinking about the concept of being like a kid and the importance of being childlike is Matthew 18 verses 1 through 4. And the subtitle is The Greatest in the Kingdom. And it says, about that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Who is greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" Jesus called a little child to him and put the child amongst them. Then he said, "I tell you the truth, unless you turn from your sins and become like little children, you will never get into the kingdom of heaven. So anyone who becomes as humble as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." And I think what's so incredibly beautiful about that specific scripture and that specific verse, but also what is so inspirational to just bring into this conversation today is truly the humility to be like a child. And I think in context to even this verse, when you think of a child, you think of someone who is essentially defenseless. Like they know that they are reliant on another in order to be provided for. They know that they cannot meet their every need alone. And there's a beautiful innocence to that of being so utterly dependent on a parent, on someone else. And the instruction on our life is to be like a child before God, to be like a child before Jesus, and to have the same humility where you are so aware that in the midst of your responsibilities to this world, to this life, accomplishments that you can achieve and earn, and all the things and depictions and labels and successes that the world will try to hand and offer you, truly to be like a child, to have the humility before God, to be like, God, apart from you, I am still nothing. The things that will try to define me in this world will not compare or shed light to who you say I am. And so that really brings us to the conversation of who are we? Like, who are we? When we think to us being humble as a child is, when we think of the innocence of being a child, when we think of the versions of ourselves that we're not afraid of rejection, that had no bias to what the world is meant to be like or should look like, who had no bias against the people around us or the clothes we like to wear. Like, there's so many questions that just fill my mind of, man, if I were to strip away every single influence in my life that makes me afraid to be who I am, makes me afraid to express myself as I am, who would I truly be? What would the clothes that I put on my body look like? What would the hobbies that I enjoy look like? What are the steps of bravery that I would walk in, fearless like a child? Like, I think of, even when you're a child on the playground, you're almost, I can't speak on behalf of every kid, but I can think of times like, even in the physical, when I was like hanging upside down on a jungle gym, I never feared falling. Like, I just hung upside down because I was like, I'm fearless, because I have no fear of this world yet. I have no fear of an outcome. I have just complete trust and bravery of I'm just going to do it because I'm like a kid and I don't know. And I think there's this beautiful innocence that as we grow up, we do lose. And I understandably so, we become an adult, we see the realities of this world. We encounter people that hurt us. We encounter circumstances that hurt us. We encounter crowds of people, whether even in middle school or high school, that tell us that we're not cool because of something. And we live in a digital age of social media where we're always being infiltrated with ideas of what is the new latest and greatest and what the cool girls are wearing, or what your relationship should look like, or XYZ, fill in the blank. We're always being sent these signals of what we should be, and it's so hard to differentiate what we are told to be and what we would innately be if we just remained in who we were created to be. And I think I don't know, even I had this conversation the other day with a girlfriend, and she was like, do you like my outfit? Is this cool? And I asked her, I was like, well, it doesn't matter if I think it's cool. Ask yourself, if nobody told you what was cool or wasn't cool, what would you decide for yourself? And she was like, I like it, but I'm afraid that it won't be cool to anybody else. And I was like, well, it doesn't matter if it's not cool to anyone else. It's what you like and enjoy. And I feel like that is such a tangible, moment that I see myself wrestle with all the time, whether it's style or, something I'm posting on social media or anything like that, of oh my gosh, I'm so afraid to wear this, or so afraid to say this, or so afraid to enjoy this because it's not cool in the world that we live in. And I don't know, it's just it makes me sad for the inner child in me that feels suppressed beneath the weight of trying to be like everybody else.
Yeah. And it also makes me think of when I envision kids and they will dress up and wear their princess outfit to school or to the grocery store. And they're so when they put that on, they put it on because that is what makes them feel confident.
Yeah.
And they do that beyond just like a physical sense of like, they do that emotionally in the way they carry themselves. And they show up like this unfiltered, pure version of themselves. And I think it's not until people start to like make comments that maybe are like, even just bring awareness, even if they're like positive. And it's like naturally you start to get in your head a little bit. But I think there's just something so sweet of like, I think we now filter ourselves so much, and we, instead of making the first question be like, do I like this? Like, is this authentic to who I am? Do I feel confident? Do I feel like a beautiful version of myself? But instead we're like, before we even ask that, or if we even ask that, I feel like we're so analyzing like, how are people going to perceive me if I do this thing? Like, I think that's the first thing that can so often come to our minds. And yeah, I think it's like, how can we unlearn that and make it something where we can like strip that back and start to think, who am I and how do I want to show up in order to be the most like authentic to myself in the way that God created me? And then when you're doing that, like, you don't have to think or worry about how people perceive you because you already have such a sense of identity. And I think to try to even make this like full circle to the verse you initially mentioned, I was reading a child's psychology book, and it was just kind of talking about like how their minds develop. And there was just this description. It was specifically like inviting parents to encourage, or not even encourage, just naturally, like when parents create a safe environment, kids, and you'll see this with little kids, it's so cute. Like they will go to, let's say, the park, for example, and they will like go up and hold your hand and like kind of wait, and they'll like stay by you and kind of observe and take everything in. And then when they start to feel like safe and comfortable, they'll then like venture out and play and like have a great time, but they always come back to you. Or maybe they'll do it for like 10 minutes and then they come back to you. They know you're there. They feel safe. Then they venture out again. Even that verse of what that reminds me of is when we feel safe, when we have a foundation, when we know our identity and we know that God is looking out for us and he's watching over us and he cares about us, we can then venture out into this place of like childlike wonder.
Wow.
Because we first are affirmed by him, and then we can come back and like have that excitement and joy and like, okay, God, I did it. Like, I have you. Okay, I'm going to go out and do it again. Like, he invites us to go out and explore. And like, I know that's what we're going to start to get into, how we can maintain that childlike joy, but it comes first from knowing that we have rest and safety in a place to come back to.
Yeah, wow. That is such a powerful, just like picture. And it makes me really think, and I think I'm like really reflecting on myself as well in this conversation of the moments that I'm full of the most fear, the most insecurity, the most like trembling before something, anxiety, worry, concern. It like breaks my heart for the younger, like little kid version of me that would have never have been afraid. Like I would have never been afraid of what someone would have thought of me if I were choosing to like operate and live from this really free, beautiful, innocent place. I become afraid, I become insecure when I start attaching my identity to things other than God. When I start attaching my identity to things of this world, or attaching my identity to things that have been spoken towards me or spoken against me, start attaching myself to evidence of this world that shows me I should be afraid. I should be afraid what people think. I should be afraid of not being cool enough. I should be afraid of being different. I should be afraid of people taking notice of me. And it's all these different narratives that I'm confident if we all sit with ourselves and really try to pinpoint of like, man, why do I feel insecure in my body and my hobbies and my joys and this and what I wear and fill in the blank. There's always like either a moment in time or words that were spoken as weapons against you that we have multiplied in our life to be these adults to feel like we've misplaced our identity. But really, I think that's what God so desperately wants to do, is he wants to strip us of the weight that the world tries to place on our shoulders and make us light again, make us free again. But we can only walk in that lightness and in that confidence when we know who we are in Jesus. And so I think, like, with that said, just even continuing the conversation on your identity, I think when we really try to look like the world and be like the world, even in our best attempts to do everything that this world is convincing us will make us cool or will make us successful or will make us noticed or fill in the blank or give us some sort of prestige to who we are, it's actually those things that strip us from our identity the most and actually leave us the most restless, the most empty, the most depleted, and forever longing for more and more and more to try to be like the rest of this world. And I think for myself, like, a time that it's like a dance with both of feeling so connected to my inner child, but also so deeply disconnected, was actually, I would say, like, right when I moved to LA. And I think I've shared in, like, previous episodes, I mean, I love living in LA. It's such a beautiful place, truly, for your inner child to thrive, but only in the presence of knowing my identity in Jesus. I think when I first moved to LA, like, I saw how deeply my identity and my sense of self just got wrought. Because especially, like, here, I think there is so much influence that is constantly telling us what we need to do in order to be cool. And I'm even trying to think of, like, another word other than, like, cool, like, trying to fit in,
like desired or like
worthy of even being talked to or noticed or a somebody, like, especially in LA, it's like you're either, and not always, but I think there can be a culture in LA and certain stereotypes where it's like you're either nobody or you're somebody. And there's so many different aspects to LA that will kind of breed this stereotype or breed this narrative that we have to be a certain way to be a somebody. And if you're anything different, then you're nothing. And that sounds really, like, intense, but I can, like, even think of, like, one specific way that might sound so silly, but for me it was, like, evidence that I was starting to really disconnect with my true identity. When I first moved to LA, I've always been, like, a girl who loves wearing color. I wear, like, so much color. And I think that just is my personality. I've been that way since I was a kid. I always wore, like, really bright colored dresses. I have, like, this, when I think of my inner child, or I think of, like, actually me as a kid, I have this very vivid image of me in, like, a bright yellow dress with yellow matching socks. And if you know me to this day, like, matching my outfits to a T with color is one of my favorite things to do. But I remember, like, moving to LA and almost feeling like when I moved here that I was like, wait, wearing color is not cool. Like, I need to be neutral. Like, I need to only wear neutrals. Like, that's what's cool. Wearing bright hot pink and blue and purple and all these things that my closet was filled of suddenly felt not, like, cool to me. And so I subconsciously, like, this wasn't even necessarily a super conscious, like, at the forefront of my mind, but I subconsciously started to accept identities that were present around me and tried to adopt it as my own. And so before I knew it, I was wearing all neutrals, which is nothing wrong with that. If you're a neutral person, that's amazing. I'm not. And that for me was a disconnect for myself. For you, that might be a connect to yourself. I know Marissa, like,
love my neutrals.
She loves her neutrals, but that's true to her. And so I don't remember how many months it was into me living in LA where I started seeing deep wells of insecurity that did not exist. I started seeing a striving in myself that didn't previously exist. I started feeling defeated when I would walk into rooms versus like feeling like I had the opportunity to bring life and light to people. I just was almost overcomplicating every single thing about my existence. And I was like, am I even worth someone like to know? Like, am I even like worthy to be in this room? Like, does what I say even matter? Just questioning every single facet of myself. And that even was trickling into like, you know, growing and welling deep insecurities in me of feeling like I wasn't, you know, pretty enough or smart enough or this enough. And it was always a question of not being enough. And I like started to reflect and I was like, wow, I allowed one little piece of my identity, as small as it may seem, as, you know what, living in LA, wearing colors isn't cool, so I cannot wear color anymore. I allowed one little thing that stripped me of who I really am and to shift my identity. And the way that multiplied into this endless cycle of striving and disconnecting from myself really kind of like hit me in the face probably 6 months into living to LA. And then I had to make the decision with God. I was like, God, this is not you telling me what's cool, what's not cool. You don't do that. Like, you just tell me, like, just be. It's the world that is trying to assimilate me to who I'm told to be. And I think when I had this moment, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go back to what Brie likes, and I'm going to do it even if nobody else is doing it. And at first, that made me feel also kind of the same. It made me feel like not cool. It made me feel different. It made me feel silly. But then I felt like as I kind of returned back to myself and started wearing color again, as silly as that sounds, it made me realize like, wow, I'm feeling a joy return into my individuality. I feel a joy returning into the belief that I get to be different. I get to be one of a kind. I get to be set apart, because that is what God's intention with me is. He didn't intend for me to look like the rest of the world. He didn't intend for you to look like the rest of the world, physically, emotionally, spiritually, all those things, like so much deeper than your appearance. His intention wasn't for you to try to be what everyone expects you to be, but it's simply just the invitation to be. And I think when I realized that, it was almost as if all these insecurities and feelings of not enoughness and wrestlings with my presence in a room started to subside. And I almost like stepped back into this confidence of myself, even though I was doing things that seemed silly, but were not necessarily the standard LA cool girl thing to do, if you will. It just like almost made me realize like, you know what? It's from that place of embracing who I am that I then get to really embrace the way God designed me. And then can I then continue to impact the world around me, not the opposite. And yeah, I mean, I think that displayed itself through so many other ways in my life, but that's like a small, maybe even seemingly silly way that we don't even realize that we are always being influenced at any given moment in time.
Yeah, I love that story so much. And I think the biggest thing is it really is something where when you give yourself permission in one area of your life to fully be yourself, that is such a like snowball effect. Like it carries over into every other area, and you really like walk with a new confidence. And this reminds me of like last week when we saw each other. We always like, you guys know, we catch up, we do our little Airborne dinner moment. And I was like, had this thing where I couldn't specifically pinpoint it, but I was like, you just seem like the version of Brie that like I just envisioned. Like you seem more like yourself than ever. It's so cool because people will start to see that and be drawn to that because it's like your individuality is just coming out and it's springing up. And it reminds me of a very similar story in my life of, I feel like I was a more shy kid. So I think the difference is maybe that I didn't really have like a full sense of who I was growing up. And I think that carried over into college a bit. And I remember feeling friction because I was just in situations and surrounded by people where I was like, I really don't fit in. And to be honest, like I just started to believe that I was never going to fit in and ever really truly have friends that like understood me. I felt like apart from my husband, I was like, I don't know that people fully get me, but I started to feel like peace with that. But I think what it was is, so once I like graduated, got married and moved out of the city, so those things all happened within a few months, and I started to notice myself like exploring new parts of me that I just didn't really give myself permission to explore previously. So I honestly feel like it wasn't until that like 22, 23 where I started to discover, and I think I've talked about this in other episodes of like, I found hobbies, like my favorite hobbies and the things that I love so much, like reading, journaling, surfing, tennis, like just all of this long list of things that just like set me on fire and that I'm so passionate about all came later. And I think what it really was is that I just felt so different because I was looking at other people and I was like, I don't have fun in the way they do. Like, I don't like going out and going to parties and like, therefore I just have nothing I like. And it wasn't until like I started to strip back everything, and we were like in that season of COVID time, so isolated, but it gave me permission to don't actually have to compare myself to other people and be like, I don't like this thing, therefore I'm this way, like I lack. Instead, it was like, when I have free time, like what do I enjoy? And I started to notice, wow, I love being in nature. Never thought I was a nature person. I love moving my body. Still don't think I'm athletic, but I still like doing it. I felt like I was creative for the first time because I gave myself freedom to explore and be creative in ways that didn't look like traditional creativity. And I found all of these like new parts of myself, and it just felt so freeing. So I think my encouragement and my intention in sharing that is, if maybe there aren't specific things of you're like, I don't fully know who I am, or I don't remember what I was like when I was a kid, we just want to give you permission to maybe stop looking at the world around you, and to even like something very practical, I think even getting off social media, like being very careful to like curate your friends and stuff. I think you will start to discover new parts of yourself, and you'll realize you're not weird, or you're not like lacking in these areas. It's just that you begin to be fully yourself. And then I noticed that the friends I wanted, like they came into my life. And it was a beautiful thing of, wow, it just feels like things began to fit in, but it came first from God being like, here's who you are. Go venture out. Like you're safe. Like go explore, go try things, find out what you're good at. Let people like speak life over you. And then people will be drawn to that, and they'll come around you and they'll affirm that. And you won't have to like strive for those people. And I'll still be in situations, and I think like I'll just be out and about and I'm like, oh gosh, I feel like insecure. Where is this coming from? But I realize it's coming from those people like projecting onto me.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, God, like I'm going to go back home and I'm going to like pray over this. Tomorrow's a new day. And then I feel like reaffirmed in that. So that was probably a lot that we just unpacked, but I hope it's helpful.
Yeah, but that's so powerful because I think, I mean, just being a human and having our existence, we have all had moments in time where we're like, I'm just weird. Like, I don't fit in. I don't belong. Like the way I think, the way I talk, the way I conversate, what I wear, what I enjoy, like I'm weird. Like I don't fit in. And I think that is like one of the most heartbreaking experiences. Like, and I remember navigating so much of my life, even my childhood as well, of thinking that of, oh, I just don't fit in. Like, why don't I like what everyone else likes? I don't get it. And then trying so hard to fit myself like the wrong puzzle piece into places and spaces and hobbies and things that I never enjoyed in the first place. And that only literally snowballs the effect of feeling like I don't belong when I'm trying to force myself to be really who I was not designed to be in the first place. Yeah. And so I think, with this, it's like, we want to just even first like dismiss that lie, if anyone's believing that while listening, that you are just so weird, or you don't belong, or you'll never fit in. Well, I think there's a beautiful thing of like, well, I really don't believe we're meant to perfectly fit in. Like,
I agree.
There's not a mold on this earth that you are meant to fit into other than the one that God created you for. And I think the thing is, if God wanted you to be like everyone else, he would have actually made you someone else. But there's a reason why there's one of you in existence on this earth, and that is because only one of you is necessary, and your individuality is actually necessary for this world, not the opposite. And I think that's really where we lose ourselves, is that we look around, and not to discredit and not to say that I'm not like this as well in times, but it's like we look around, and even on a superficial level, girls dress the same, guys dress the same. A lot of people are, taking the same photos on social media, or doing the same hobbies, or doing the same weekend activities. And you look around, and we all know what it's like when it just seems like so much of our culture is like a copy and paste of one another. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, don't mistake my heart in this, but at the same time, as I think we spend so much of our life under the pain of just wanting so desperately to be like the rest of the world, when we forget that God individually designed us to be different and set apart from the world. And I know for myself, I feel like my purpose has really thrived when I embraced my individuality, and I embraced the fact that God created Bree to be Bree and Bree alone. There's no one else who can truly be like me, because no one else is intended to be, just as I'm not intended to be like anybody else here on this earth. And so the fact that I am so different is the beauty of God's design in me, not the opposite. It's not what's wrong with me. It's what was intentionally created about me, and what is intentionally created about you as well. And I think when we can start reframing that, even in moments when we catch ourselves of, gosh, I'm not cool like this person, or I don't fit in with these people, well, praise God that you are different enough that you're taking notice. And so I think that even transitions into the next part of this is, I really believe like our fierce individuality, and also connecting with the innocence of our inner child, is really so tied into our purpose. Like, so deeply desire for you guys to look at your life, look at your identity, look at who you are through the lens of your inner child. A child who has not been interrupted by this world, a child who is not afraid of what everyone is going to think of them, a child who is not suppressing the true wants, true desires, true loves, and lusts for life by or according to social media or the culture and world around us. I think there's such a beauty about us, such a freedom about us, such a humility about us that can only be set ablaze and set free truly when we are willing and able to look at our life through the lens of who God created us to be, and not who the world is trying to curate us to be. And so when thinking about this, I just was like thinking of like, okay, Brie, even for myself, what are some ways that I can practically navigate this world and try to connect with my inner child? And so we came up with just 4 super simple things that came up for me when I was processing this for myself, and things that you can do on the week-to-week basis, day-to-day, but even moment-to-moment, of just trying to embrace that part of you once more. So if you're trying to channel your inner child, I would say the first thing that I would consider or look at is, what is an activity that maybe you did as a child that was so interrupted by this world that you loved, and how is that something that you can bring into your life present day? And I actually was inspired by this when I was reflecting on my own childhood and like thinking about who I was when I was a kid. And when I was a kid, my favorite thing to do was I would get on my bike. Well, for one, I would steal my mom's little camera out of her drawer. I knew exactly where it was in my parents' room. I would steal her little camera without her knowing. And then I would like put it in like my bike's little basket, and I would go ride around the neighborhood by myself until I found, literally, I'm from Texas, so I'd find a very wide open field. And I kid you not, I would take my mom's camera, and I would just lay in the field and I would look up at the flowers or the wheat or the grass around me, whatever season it was, and I would take the most random like landscape shots on my mom's camera. And I remember thinking I was so artistic, like, which is so funny. And I was thinking that through the lens of a child. Like, I remember thinking like, wow, like I love this photo so much. And even just doing silly things like taking random photos of like soccer balls like on the driveway and thinking like, whoa, that's such a cool angle of the soccer ball. Like
we need to dig up these photos.
I know. I don't know if they even exist anymore, honestly. But yeah, and just like taking these really artistic photos. And actually I do remember taking photos of myself like laying in the field and I'm like just smiling. And it's such a funny memory that actually came to me like in light of thinking of this conversation. And I had a moment where it's like, whoa, I do that present day. Like that is my greatest joy. And sometimes the greatest way I decompress from a day is going on a sunset walk, bringing my little camera and creating something artistic out of the moment, whether it's taking a photo or a video of the sunset or the surfers in the water or capturing this really cool angle of myself or something in this world around me. And it was this moment of like, oh my gosh, I have not changed. Like this young version of me, 8, 9, 10 years old, to this present day is still living in that same joy, which just shows me that connecting to my inner child really is a connection to my purpose here on this earth. But only from that place when I can really like hone in to the same imagination and creativity I had then now, can I like walk in this joy that brings me so much life. And so that was like a really powerful moment for me that made me be like, wow. Yeah, just the correlation between my childhood and now and like that specific activity. I don't know. I thought that was really special.
That's so cute. That's so like what I envision when I picture little Brie. I'm like, that is so precious.
And probably wearing a dress.
Of course,
for sure.
You have to. Okay, point number 2 is to talk kindly to yourself. And when I think of this, I imagine even specifically like the times in my life where I think, well, naturally, I think picture like getting ready in the morning and I'm like looking in the mirror. And I do think like if we go to the default in our mind, we are quick to point out things that feel off for us. And so I even notice like I feel like I'm quicker to be like, oh, my hair looks really weird today. Instead of like praising something that actually I like, of like, oh, wow, like I look so like, I don't know, like my skin is glowing or like I look so joyful and well rested today.
Yeah.
Or I like love this color on me. Like I think with this, it's just like a reminder to be like, okay, let's halt. Let's be mindful of how we're talking to ourselves and swap that when we're feeling like we want to criticize something, take note of that and then replace it with something that is positive. And I think of like, if that feels hard, a go-to for me is like scripture. Scripture is truth that I love to speak over myself. It reminds me of my identity. And I think that's so powerful. But I think that's something we can catch in ourselves, like even beyond how we look, even just like how we are that day, stretching ourselves to even think like after a long, exhausting day at work of like, what did I do well today? Like I like showed up and just was consistent and steadfast and like pursued this job, even though it was exhausting, to the best of my ability. And like, I feel accomplished in that. Like, I think searching for those things, sometimes it's a search, but eventually, as we mentioned with our gratitude episode, like it's a muscle and it will become so much easier.
Yeah. I also think about like when a kid does anything, how like a parent or like an adult will be like, oh, good job. Like,
and they're like so proud of themselves too. They're like, look what I did.
Yeah. And it's like they literally like picked up a toy and like that's it. Or, you know, or they like closed a door or, you know, all these like first things that are so small and so innocent. And they're like, look, or like shows you a drawing they did and it's one scribble and like one color. And you're like, oh my gosh, it's beautiful. And yeah, like I think that's also what it's like to talk kindly to yourself. Like, and we've heard it before of talking to yourself as you would a friend, but also it's like talking to yourself as you would a kid. Like, can you be in awe and wonder of yourself for the little things that you did that day? And sometimes, I mean, yeah, just praising yourself for things that might seem so silly and so small. Like, you know what? I'm exhausted today. I'm proud of myself for washing my face today. That sounds so silly, but I think that's where it's just really reinvigorating your relationship with yourself and praising yourself as you would a kid. And I think it also just like increases your appreciation for who you are. That is like really special. I don't know. I know that really helps me and like gives me a more like fulfillment in like my joy when I'm really like patient and tender towards myself. I'm not always, like I can be very hard on myself, but that definitely helps. Another point to consider when channeling your inner child is really just to give yourself permission to slow down. I think also, like, once again, with the concept of being like a child, you know, thinking back to when I was on the playground as a kid, I had no concept of how long recess was. I had no concept of when dinner time was. I had no concept of anything. Like, I would just get lost in the moment, in my craft, in playing outside. And it wasn't until, you know, my mom would call me in or the teacher would say recess is over that I then would move on to the next. And I think sometimes, I mean, you become an adult and it's like you're now the teacher and you have to like tell yourself like, okay, this is the next thing you have to do. Your life demands things of you. You have responsibilities. There's always something next to do. That sometimes even our best attempts to slow down, we're not actually giving ourselves permission to just be and to exist and to embrace a moment. And so I think slowing down is easier said than done, but I do think it's so necessary to give yourself the space to truly breathe, to appreciate your life, to appreciate the moment in time you're in, or let alone the season of life you're in, and just give yourself the ability to exist in that place, whether it's something as simple as, I don't know, like your walk and being really present with going on a walk, or being really present with, like I said, an entire season of your life where you're feeling unsure, you're feeling unsteady. I think like a child who has no concept of time and no need to rush or get ahead or to set aside a toy for anything in this world, I think there's a beauty of navigating certain moments of our life just the same.
Mm-hmm. And we just did a whole episode, I think it's called The Art of Slowing Down and Savoring, unpacking this, because I love this so much. I think it's such an important thing.
Yes.
And then the last one, number 4, is to make time to play and enjoy the beauty of this life. And there's so many different ways to do this. One that pops in my mind kind of happened on accident. And I had COVID a few weeks ago. I got super sick. Literally felt like I couldn't get out of bed. And I just was like, you know what? I'm so sick. I can't really do anything, but I have a little bit of energy that hits me in the afternoon. And has been like such beautiful weather here. I'm like, I'm going to take myself to the beach. I'm not going to get anyone sick. I'm doing exactly what I'm doing at home. Like, I'm going to bring my chair and a book and I'm going to sit there and be outside. And it's so funny of like when you're so sick, how that becomes the like ultimate accomplishment of your day, where I'm like, I'm so proud of myself for getting in the car, driving, sitting down, reading my book outside. Like, I was like, this feels like such a win. And so every day I'd be like, no matter how I'm feeling, this is the highlight of my day. And this is something important I can accomplish. And it actually kind of shifted my perspective. And I had a moment where I obviously got better and I like found myself craving doing that. I was like, I just want to like go outside, sit on my chair and like read my book. And it was such a simple, silly thing. But I think what this just makes me think of is like when you're a kid, you have these goals and they're not goals that you would have necessarily as an adult, but they're actually really like powerful goals and they're really sweet to have like some kind of like playful vision. And I think at least for myself, I'm someone who always feels like I need to be accomplishing things. And I think there's a way.
To that.
Yeah, I think you can actually channel that and use it in an unexpected way. This is something I've truly just realized, like re-envisioned myself for. And I'm like, what if my goal was literally like, I'm going to try to just get outside for 30 minutes a day? Or for me, this is like, I know a little bit specific, but I was like, I've already been to the beach for sunset 10 days out of September. What if I just do that every day in September? And I'm like, that is so not a goal I would let myself have like even a year ago. I'm like, Marissa, there's literally nothing, like you're not accomplishing anything. You're not getting further in your career. Like you're not doing anything of true value, quote unquote. But I was like, you know what? That feels like a special goal for this season of my life. What if I'm just childlike and that is like important to me? And I see how I have to be creative because I have like a full schedule. So like I'll have to invite people into that. I'll have to fit this in. And I started doing it and I've already missed like one day. But it's been so fun and it's such a like playful childlike goal.
That's sweet.
But I've loved it so much. And so it just really has like shifted my perspective a bit on that.
I love that so much. And I feel like, yeah, like even the innocence of that is such a beautiful example of, yeah, giving yourself permission to slow down, play, and just embrace your day-to-day moments. But we pray that this, conversation more than anything encourages you to be so free in who you are and really allows you to just settle into the fact that your identity has truly nothing to do with the definition of the world around you and everything to do with who God has designed you to be. And I think the more that we be like children and we have the humility to recognize that we are different, we are set apart, and there's beauties and intricacies of our minds, of our personalities, of our loves, of our hobbies that are intended to be full and expressed in this world. And I think it really gives you so much opportunity to strip away the insecurities, the comparisons, the fears, and just to embrace who you were designed to be all along. So we pray for that freedom over you guys. I pray for that freedom over myself. I can think of numerous takeaways that I needed, as always, for my own heart and my own being. But yeah, we love you guys so much, and we hope to just be all more like our inner child ourselves.
Okay, you guys, for this week's Love Notes, I feel like we've done this in the past, but want to make it relevant for 2024, our fall favorites. So, of course, you know we're foodies, so that's going to be the first one we choose. What is your favorite food when you think of fall?
Oh my gosh, I actually need to think about this. What's yours?
Naturally, I start thinking of Thanksgiving food.
That's what I was gonna say too. I'm like thinking Thanksgiving.
I would say the first thing that popped in my mind was sweet potatoes, but what I will say is that is just like a year-round favorite.
Me too.
Like I have them all the time. I think maybe what would be more specific are like the squashes, the butternut squash, spaghetti squash.
I love squashes.
So yummy.
They're so good. You know, I love that. Yes, it's so good. Like the way I actually got so excited for squash. Can you tell I'm a little hungry? I also love like fall desserts. Like everything about fall desserts is just so cozy. It's like the aroma of like whether it's apple pie or like pumpkin bread or anything like that. Oh my gosh. That's just what I think of like quintessential fall is all of the yummy like desserts that are suddenly like feel more in season, you know?
Yeah, because I don't really bake in the summertime, but once it becomes fall, I'm like, ooh, I'll make some soup and then I'll make a little dessert.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I think of like all the cozy things for your tummy, like like soup and warm pumpkin breads and stuff like that. Yeah.
I can't wait. I want to like go bake right now.
Me too.
This next one kind of goes hand in hand, a favorite scent, which makes me think of food and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I do think of like the scent of like fall desserts, like apple pie. But
I feel like I can smell it.
I know. I feel like I can smell it too. I don't know why too. Fall reminds me of like pine scents and like
fresh, crisp air.
Yeah, almost like fresh, crisp air. And like, even though we don't get that as much in California, like we're just like always kind of warm, but I don't know, like the smell of what I imagine like being in a Christmas tree forest or a pine tree forest. Like that's like the fragrance of like candles that start burning, and that's like what I really think of. Also, I think of the scent, like the underlying scent of like cinnamon always being in the air.
That's what I was thinking of. I love cinnamon. I always cook with cinnamon. I also think of ginger. That's fun. I love to bake with ginger. But then also I'm just like picturing the smell of like being in Yosemite, and it's like you're surrounded by trees and just that fresh, crisp fragrance and like the dew and even like dirt. I don't know.
Yeah.
That sounds so cozy right now.
It does.
Okay, favorite fall style. So anything like clothing related that you love.
I'm trying to think. I think once I can start bringing a beanie out.
I love beanies.
I love a good beanie. I really do. I think I'm just excited for like the necessity of like needing to wear a long sleeve, or like even, I don't know, like needing to wear sweatpants on like my morning walk to like keep warm. Like something like that just sounds so lovely. I will say, like, I feel like in California we don't do like full fall clothes. Yeah. But we still need like our jeans. I think for me, I do love the transition where every single morning when I wake up and go on my morning walk, I know, I need to put like pants on. I need to put jeans on. I need to put sweatpants on. I need to put something to keep me warm. Versus in the summer, I'm like shorts and, short sleeve shirt. And so I think once we start transitioning into that more consistently, I love it. Honestly, I don't mind bringing my puffer jacket out. I think that's also what's so funny of living in California. It's like such a thing where, because it's like both like colder for us, but still not that cold. There's definitely a point in time, which is approaching very soon, where I will go on my walks. I'm literally wearing a puffer jacket on the top of me, but then I'm wearing shorts on the bottom of me. And that's fully an acceptable outfit in California. Like,
which I love.
People understand. They're like, that makes perfect sense.
You know what it makes me think of? We'll always like joke when I feel like we're out and about of like looking at what everyone wears in like a fall day, because you will truly have people in shorts and a tee, but then you'll also have people that are in like jeans, and then they'll have like their like thin puffer.
Yeah.
Especially once it hits like sunset time.
Yes.
I notice where I'm like, whoa, we are all over the map of like what people are wearing. And I do kind of love the freedom in that of like, I can kind of wear whatever I feel like. And naturally I love layering. So I'm like, I love having a little sweater to like throw over my shoulders and like, no, I can pull it on over. So I would say like a little cardigan. Love a little cardigan.
Love a little cardi.
Okay, favorite fall activity.
Gosh, I think, and I actually don't even remember if I did this last year, but I think like the quintessential idea of like going to like an apple picking farm, or like going and picking up a pumpkin, like stuff like that sounds so lovely. But I think truly like what fall, just like the whole season in general, really feels like it embodies for me is just like the sense of being cozy with like people I love. So I don't know why it feels like almost the initiation of like more like movie nights in, or like dinner parties and just like gatherings of people. I think there's something really celebratory about the season, whether it is like actual Thanksgiving or something of the sort, or if it's just like a weekend activity. It feels like it's just a time where there's more. I mean, you're gathering all summer long, but it feels different.
It does. I mean? I feel like summer, it's not that it's unintentional, but it's like you're just kind of outside playing around with friends. But then I feel like once it hits fall and with like Thanksgiving and Friendsgiving, you like intentionally start to gather people. That's even what I pictured of like, I want to like take my nephew to the pumpkin patch, and I want to like have girls over and do a projector night. Like a little, like a backyard movie night. And then it actually becomes like perfect hosting weather, at least where we're living. So that I think is what I'm excited for, is to have just like cozy curated nights.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to call it.
I love that.
Okay, last and final one. What is your favorite fall music? This can be an artist or like a genre.
I would say like genre-wise, I don't know if it's like just folk, but like kind of
I love folk. I'm in such a folk.
So much.
I've been listening to fall music all throughout summer. I'm going to be so honest.
Too. I think that is also my personality, kind of.
Yeah.
Like, I love music that almost like gets me in my feelings a little bit. That makes me, I don't know.
Like road trip vibes. Like I'm driving through a national park, headed up north. Like
yes, that's exactly the
whimsical.
Yes, like I don't know if it's just folk, but like folk inspired music where I don't know, it feels so happy and so life-giving and like is inspiring this sense of adventure in you, even if the lyrics are like something different. I don't know. I think that's like my default for the fall is just music that almost like makes me feel like I'm embracing the crisp morning air and being out in the mountains or going on an adventure. I think that that's my favorite type of music.
I totally agree. I'm in the same boat. Okay, guys, that is the end of this episode. We hope, as always, you enjoyed, and we will see you in our next one. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you so much for listening. We pray this episode was encouraging and life-giving. If you found it valuable, please share it with a friend, leave a review, and subscribe.
And be sure to follow us along over on Instagram at With Love Always Podcast. Signing off with all of our love always, Bree
and Marissa.